Offerings and altars, I brought this lamb to slaughter, and I stand at the mouth of it all.
And she knows she's at risk of perjury if she lies. I never complained to Miss Wilson or anyone else that Miss Ghost or Mr. Cameron made me feel uncomfortable or caused me any trauma whatsoever.
All I can say is that she came to me, she made what I obviously inferred as a sexual harassment complaint, and I had a duty to then act on it.
What I'm a little bit confused about though, this is a text from you to Amanda Ghost. You say, Charlotte says all good. She just meant it was a bizarre situation, not that she personally felt uncomfortable. So, all good there. Ghost responds, oh, thank F for that. Oh my God, that's hilarious. I nearly died. You respond, she instantly was like, oh no, zero issues at all.
I believe this is truly the first time the world has seen SH accusations, sexual harassment accusations, weaponized in this manner. Not someone accusing another individual of victimizing them, but instead an uninvolved third party accusing an individual of victimizing another person and then harassing and attacking the so-called victim for not agreeing with the allegation that they were harassed. That is insane. This is where we are in 2026. I think it's safe to say the whole Me Too crusade has been one of the most counterproductive movements in human history. It has officially strangled all legitimate discourse surrounding the victimization of women, which is a shame that people now have fatigue for something as gravely serious and very prevalent as the victimization of women, because too many shameless female careerists have weaponized it to push lies that serve their own depraved ends. It just blows my mind. I'm going to read to you the words of the victim at the center of this case. However, I would argue she is not a victim for the reasons Rebel Wilson has asserted. I had been fearful that she would do this. I felt she was retaliating against me and seeking to punish me for having spoken out. I was fearful because this signaled to me that she wasn't stopping. I didn't know what she was capable of or what she would do next. I felt powerless and that she was using all of her influence against me and that my reputation was in jeopardy. Intimidation, retaliation, fear, power imbalances, reputation in jeopardy, and relentless harassment. That is the language a victim uses when discussing their abuser. It's textbook, but it might shock you to realize her words are not referencing Amanda Ghost, the producer accused of sexual misconduct towards her. She is speaking of Rebel Wilson, the so-called whistleblower herself. The idea that people were going to read that I was cast in Gatsby and received a record deal in exchange for changing a story about sexual abuse was devastating to me and still is. I was mortified knowing Rebel's statements about me were likely reaching millions of people as their first impression of me, something that I felt I had no power over anymore. I believed I had lost my career and in a way my life, as Rebel was often the only thing people were talking to me about. I felt utterly lost and isolated. Again, this is so symptomatic of an abusive relationship. The way women speak of their abusers, how their abusers consume their lives and destroy their social connections. No one has any right to steal a person's agency in this way and tell them that their perspective on their own lived experience doesn't matter because it happens to be inconvenient to the narrative they're trying to craft. And also, doing so heedless to the untold damage it's inflicting on this person's mental and emotional health, their career, and their social life. This is what Charlotte MacInnes said about being served by Rebel's people with a deposition subpoena while visiting LA because she lives in Australia. She was in LA temporarily, but somehow they tracked her down, which is unsettling to the extreme. time. I feel that Rebel was trying to intimidate and harass me by trying to serve me with a document personally in this way. I was shaken for a few days after this, not knowing how they knew where I was going to be. I began questioning my own safety. I am still suspicious about any new people I meet. That is just horrendous, because for them to have tracked her down while she was traveling, that means they're stalking her. So they either had a connection with whoever made her travel arrangement, or they're just literally following her. That's just terrifying in every way, and I understand her paranoia. It's worth noting that Rebel Wilson reportedly hired a private investigator in addition to a crisis PR team, who have since been caught in discovery discussing a plan to smear Amanda Ghost before the defamatory anonymous website surfaced. So it's no surprise that Charlotte feels intimidated and stalked, in addition to being relentlessly smeared by Rebel and her legal team and her PR teams. You do realize these are all the tactics used by Harvey freaking Weinstein to slander and terrorize his victims into silence for decades. A convicted serial rapist, Rebel is mimicking his behavior with her teams and resources, which is insane. If Charlotte MacInnes was really a victim of sexual misconduct on set, why would Rebel and her team need to go to the extent of possibly defaming Amanda Ghost on anonymous websites? Why can't the truth stand for itself in court? Why do you have to go that far? It's because it's about a smear campaign. This is a case where the smear campaign was real and that there's actual proof for said smear campaign. The thing about Blake Lively's accusations of a smear campaign is that she was looking for an excuse for her own bad behavior causing her downfall. And so first she went back to the extortion of Justin Baldoni that she was using on set. Basically these, in my opinion, fake sexual harassment allegations she was wielding over his head, because sexual harassment can pretty much be whatever you want it to be. It's not like sexual assault that is clearly defined. She basically made up things and retroactively said things were sexual harassment, even things she engaged in herself or that she initiated herself. And then once a woman makes that accusation, they can easily weaponize it in a post-Me Too society, and that's what Blake Lively was doing. She came back, she wanted creative control, so she came up with this stupid list of demands to make Justin agree to it, because she was holding his production hostage, basically, because she had been cast and half of the movie had been filmed already. So he wanted to not lose money, and he agreed to her stupid stipulations, even though they had no bearing in reality. Cut to her downfall during the press tour. None of this would have become public. It all would have went under the radar. But Blake Lively was being so despicable in the promotion tour that the audience started picking up on her behavior and calling it out. It's as simple as that. And once the audience got started on her, you know how online is. They look for any excuse to tear someone apart, especially celebrities that they find insufferable. So once the audience got started in on Blake Lively, other people joined in, including, I believe her name was Kirsty Flaw, the journalist who put out the interview of Blake Lively being an absolute bitch that went mega viral and really basically cemented her downfall for all time. And so because of all of that, Blake Lively wanted to say it was Justin, or she wanted to blame him. So she literally tried to get his team to put out a statement taking blame for her downfall, which was clearly self-induced. And when he wouldn't, she said the gloves were coming off. And that's when she went to the New York Times with this pathetic fake CRD complaint that she never planned to file as a lawsuit, in my opinion. And the New York Times was able to report on it with a reporter privilege, so they were not held liable for defaming Justin and his team, etc., etc. Blake wanted to say there was a smear campaign, and she suggested that there was one because of the people involved in the case on Justin's side that were a part of his PR team, which would be Melissa Nathan from TAG, or the agency group, and I believe his name is Jed Wallace. And to be fair to Blake Lively, she probably was making valid points about these people being hired, which I do see now in the evidence surfacing from this case. It seems like these people do specialize in smear campaigns, and they are pretty vicious and they do not stick to the truth from what I'm seeing. However, the problem with Blake trying to claim that in Justin's case is that Justin is not Rebel Wilson. Justin is not cut from the same cloth as these PR people. He needed them because they were the best in town, I guess, for a crisis. I now believe Brian Friedman is included in that culture of smearing people to win a case at any cost. Justin Baldoni is not cut from the same cloth. He hired bulldogs because the New York Times did so much damage to him, but that does not automatically mean he engaged in a smear campaign.
Was there a coordinated smear campaign to bring down Blake Lively?
100% no. You know, Justin Baldoni from the get-go said, I don't want to do anything negative toward her. I don't want to hurt her.
Well, they've already released some text messages in their lawsuit against the New York Times. They show a lot. Blake Lively's first complaint and then subsequent lawsuit that she filed earlier this week had edited versions of text messages that, without added context, paint one picture. But now, when we know the full totality of what was said, for example, the crisis PR expert Melissa Nathan and his longtime publicist Jen Abel confirming, oh, I didn't plant that. That wasn't us. It changes the narrative totally. It seems apparent now, after I have poured through Justin Baldoni's lawsuit, to me that there was no smear campaign and everything happened organically as a response to what Blake Lively was saying and doing in interviews.
We saw countless text messages from Justin Baldoni throughout the entire situation before the allegations were even leveled about sexual harassment, where he was trying to take the high road. He was being gracious with Blake. He was being patient. He was giving her everything she wanted. He was apologetic. He was prayerful. He was literally praying for her, asking people to pray for him. So because he's deeply religious, Blake Lively had a harder time proving that he was orchestrating a smear campaign. And she had a harder time proving that because the bulk of what was being said about Blake online was based on her own behavior on camera. So it's not the same as allegations being fabricated out of whole cloth, which seems to be the case in this case against Amanda Ghost. Blake Lively's so-called smear campaign started when she was destroying the marketing campaign or the press tour. She was just being an insufferable bitch, very selfish, not speaking about domestic violence, trying to make light and trivialize the heavier themes of the film, and she was hawking booze, which is insane when you know anything about domestic violence and the statistics and how much alcohol drives a lot of the violence we see against women. She's also just not a good person, so there are a plethora of clips of her being a cunt, and so none of that went in her favor. So it's not the same as people coming up with the lie that Blake was human trafficking. That's what's happening with Amanda Ghost. That is a true smear campaign because they are fabricating lies and then spreading them to tear this woman down because there's no actual proof of her being a bad person. There's plenty of proof of Blake being a horrendous person and her husband, and there was plenty of proof that she was extorting Justin on set, false allegations, which is not the case here. There's also proof that Blake wanted control of the film from the beginning. There's also text messages of Blake Lively pushing her weight around, using Taylor Swift's name and her husband's name to pressure this man into relinquishing control of the movie to her. All of that disproves the idea that first Blake Lively is sexually harassed, and also the idea that her sexual harassment complaints were brought forth in earnest, and also the fact that there was a smear campaign because everything being said about her, in large part, I would say, was true and had documentary evidence. It had video evidence of her being this way, so there was no denying it. There was also a video that surfaced of her talking about how she rug pulls directors and manipulates them. She's very self-involved. Everything she does is with self-interest in mind. That became very apparent, and once that's apparent, the public hates you, especially when you're an entitled, privileged, nepo baby celeb. That's Blake Lively's problem. She had no case. So even in some world, even if Jed Wallace and Melissa Nathan wanted to smear her, or were even hired to smear her by people other than Justin Baldoni, they didn't have to do anything. That was kind of the humorous part of their text messages. They were amazed that they didn't actually have to resort to that, because I'm sure they have different levels of crisis PR, and I'm sure the smearing is based on the request of their clients, and it comes from people like Rebel Wilson, who is extremely vicious in my opinion. She's the type of client that would ask for a smear campaign, that would ask for these smear websites to be built. Justin Baldoni is not. All evidence proves he did not want a smear campaign, and he didn't even want bots helping to post things in his favor. So the circumstances of these cases are pretty different, even though there's a lot of overlap with the main figures involved. And I will say, if you want to say Melissa Nathan, Brian Friedman, and Jed Wallace are horrible people, I totally agree now. Justin Baldoni, no. He's as good as he always seemed, which is the irony here, is that all of the discovery only proved he was actually a good person. Even though he was weird and too compassionate and nice, that's who he really is at heart. So the grand irony in this case with Rebel Wilson is that, in my opinion, the only people actually victimizing Charlotte MacInnes and inappropriately inappropriately sexualizing her, by the way, are Rebel Wilson and her lawyer, Brian Friedman. Yes, that Brian Friedman, who I've lost all respect for. It looks to me like he is just a disgustingly amoral defense attorney, which is characteristic of defense attorneys, looking to cash in on yet another headline-grabbing legal battle at any expense, including truth and justice, which is a shame. And I said that in the Justin Baldoni case. I said Blake's attorneys were acting like sleazy defense attorneys where they wanted their clients to win at any cost, even though it was evident she was in the wrong. And so I thought Brian Friedman was different. He's not. It's just that Justin Baldoni is different and was actually innocent. And that made Brian Friedman look good by association, but I see now he's willing to play just as dirty as Blake's attorneys. And Rebel Wilson can take all of her pathetic moral posturing and pretense of advocating for a victim who she is now relentlessly smearing because it's expedient for her PR ploy and shove it up her washed up Aussie ass. She intimidated and bullied and harassed this poor actress and gaslit the public about her so badly that Charlotte didn't even show up to the premiere of her first movie because she didn't want to be anywhere near Rebel because she felt unsafe. That is how a victim behaves around their abuser, not the whistleblower. But we're supposed to believe Rebel is doing all she's doing to protect Charlotte from SH from someone else? Imagine that. Charlotte continues in her affidavit, quote, "I was also angry that Rebel claims to be someone who stands up for women and young Australian talent, but then was so maliciously and unfairly persisting with a narrative that painted me as a liar, prostitute, sellout, and whore. I was confused as to how she had ever been accepted by this industry as a respected professional, as it felt to me these actions were somehow comfortable to her. I felt as though she was ripping me apart and showing it off to the world. I remember crying every day for weeks. This is fucking crazy for someone to have to verbalize about a person claiming to advocate for them as a victim of SH, being violated to her core and made to feel unsafe by the lies and harassment of her former boss, which has destroyed her personhood. It's bonkers that Rebel is fooling anyone into believing she is a victimized whistleblower here. My heart breaks for this poor girl because it's almost like, how do you even undo all of this? Even a judgment in court and a payment wouldn't undo the damage Rebel has done to her psyche and her trust of people. The main incident at the center of this controversy took place in September 2023, before the filming of The Deb even began. According to Charlotte MacInnes' affidavit, she's the lead actress at the heart of the scandal. Pre-production for the film took place in Sydney from around September 4th, 2023 to around October 13th, 2023. Filming started on October 17th and the production completed on December 9th, 2023. According to The Guardian, a significant dispute in the case was a conversation between the actors in a studio in September 2023. According to Rebel, concerns about sexual harassment were raised during that conversation, while Charlotte argues she didn't say anything of the sort. The court heard that the conversation between the pair took place a day after Charlotte and a producer of the film, Amanda Ghost, had swum together at Bondi Beach. Sue Christenthau, I believe her name is pronounced, she's a lawyer for Charlotte. She told the court that Amanda Ghost suffered cold urticaria, I believe is pronounced. It's a condition where the skin is basically allergic to cold water. So she suffered urticaria after the swim, and it's a skin condition that left her in red welts and shaking uncontrollably to the point where she couldn't speak. So Charlotte helped her back to a penthouse apartment that the pair were staying in nearby and ran her a bath. Amanda reportedly got into the shower at this time. The pair, who were both still in bathing suits, got into the bath together, Kristenthal told the court. Another woman brought the pair hot drinks, and the trio all spoke together while Charlotte and Amanda stayed in the bath. Kristenthal said that the bath was so large the women were not touching each other. The pair then joked about it via text messages the next day, with Charlotte sharing a picture of the two of them on the beach before the swim and commenting, "beginning of the end." And to me, that just indicates that Charlotte was okay and she understood it was a medical emergency and that she was not harassed and did not feel uncomfortable. Also, the fact that there was a third party present who spoke with them while they were in the bath and could testify to the fact that they were not touching, it was not sexual, and she even brought them warm drinks, which lends credence to the fact that there was a medical emergency where she needed to be warmed up. It all, in my opinion, proves that there was nothing sexual involved in this situation, even though it was a bizarre situation. Charlotte was not at all concerned about the bath or her interactions with Amanda, Kristenthal said. The following day, when the filming for the Deb continued, cast and crew members were told about the swim. Rebel and Charlotte had a conversation on a couch at the studio. While the pair agreed that the conversation took place, its contents are in dispute. Kristenthal told the court that Charlotte made it clear to Rebel that the bath had not made her feel uncomfortable. But David Sibiton, representing Rebel, said that his client was told by Charlotte that she was concerned about Amanda's behavior. But Kristenthal alleged this changed, or this came up, after disputes arose about budgets and contracts for the Deb later in 2023. Quote, Miss Rebel, as a part of that dispute, raises the issue of sexual harassment as leverage, we say, Kristenthal told the court. We say this is a habit of hers whenever she doesn't get her way. She raises this allegation that had been put to bed for her own commercial benefit. Rebel took out defamation insurance so she could, quote, go ballistic about Amanda and the other producers online, Kristenthal alleged in court, before hiring a U.S. lawyer and engaging with private investigators and a PR agency as a part of a dispute with the producers. The court heard that Jed Wallace, a worker for the PR agency, said in a voicemail that it was important Amanda was portrayed as someone who hired hookers for Len Blavatnik, I believe his name is pronounced, the billionaire owner of Warner Music. And this is a quote from that voicemail from Jed Wallace. Quote, "We can't just do it like, oh, she's a bitch, she sucks. It's like, it's got to be really, really heavy and connected to something heavy. So we'll talk about that tomorrow too." And so this was said in a 2024 voice message that Kristenthal played in the court, or that she referred to the court. Kristenthal told the court that the information later found on anonymous websites about Amanda Ghost was also shared in a chat between the agency staff, which proves it originated with them, in my opinion. Metadata from one of the websites, which contains headlines such as "Amanda Ghost is a destroyer of worlds," which is so lame, showed it had been edited by Camp Sugar, Rebel's company. They had access to the website and were editing it. But Rebel's lawyers told the court, quote, "She never asked anyone to publish information about Ghost online." That's very specific wording. That doesn't mean she didn't ask them to commission it. That doesn't mean she wasn't paying for it to be published. Kristenthal told the court that Rebel then made a series of Instagram posts claiming she had to report Amanda's conduct and that Charlotte was to blame for the Deb not being released, and presenting herself as a savior of women when she was really a bully. So in my opinion, it should be easy to prove whether or not Rebel Wilson made official complaints about this sexual harassment, whether she actually documented it anywhere other than her demented mind. And also, it should be easy to prove when it was documented. If she only tried to make a formal complaint after the creative disputes came up, then it basically destroys the credibility of the so-called complaints, especially when the victim herself is not agreeing with them. So this is all really perplexing for many reasons. First, I must admit, I do find it odd that a producer would think it was okay to get into a bath with a young actress. I get that it was a non-sexual thing and that Charlotte ran the bath on behalf of Amanda and made the decision to get in with her, but as the producer, Amanda should have discouraged her from doing so because of what we're seeing going on right now. The optics are so bad, they could easily be twisted by a liar in order to harm both women. I also understand that Amanda was experiencing a medical emergency at the time, so we could extend her a little grace in considering maybe she wasn't thinking clearly, and had she been, she would have used more discretion. With that being said, however, regardless of what happened in the bath that day, Rebel Wilson is completely out of line as it pertains to possibly outing a sexual harassment incident to the public for self-serving reasons, mainly to smear several producers in one fell swoop who she reportedly had been having creative differences with from long before this incident in the bath ever took place. According to The Guardian, during Charlotte's defamation trial against Rebel, the first witness called on Monday was Hannah Riley, an actor, writer, and director who wrote the deb for the stage before it was adapted for screen. But she was later involved in a dispute with Rebel over writing credits for the screenplay for the deb, which was resolved at arbitration in her favor. Kristenthal told the court that the dispute was one of the matters Rebel was considering when she raised the issue of sexual harassment. And this is again when it harkens back so clearly to the Blake versus Justin drama, because creative differences predated the sexual harassment incidents on set, and it's just crazy how clearly those allegations were being weaponized to harm him and take his movie, in my opinion. So Rebel wrote an email to Hannah Riley's agent, who is the woman she was in dispute with about the writing credit, and she wrote this email in late December 2023, which Kristenthal described in court as offensive, aggressive, irrational, and abusive. And this is becoming quite characteristic of Rebel Wilson and her behavior online, in my opinion. It included the sentence, quote, "If I was unclear about my personal feelings towards your client, Hannah Riley, I hope this email gives you some clarity. She's just a nasty, vicious human being." According to the Rolling Stone, Hannah Riley, who wrote the original stage musical and adapted it for screen, has broken her silence on the matter. Quote, "What should have been a joyous experience, a dream come true, has now been overshadowed by unnecessary drama. It's been a heartbreaking and baffling turn of events. This follows in the same patterns of It Ends With Us and even Don't Worry Darling, because they had toxic, narcissistic females on set trying to take control and trying to do really disgusting, amoral things. What followed the Australian Writers Guild ruling on the writing credit has been a series of personal attacks and false accusations, most recently targeting Charlotte, who I cast in the original stage production," Riley said. "She's a phenomenal talent and consummate professional who deserves to be celebrated and not dragged into chaos. I've been very reluctant to speak publicly, but I just want the hostility to stop so we can all move forward." So at the core of the dispute are writing credits and music credits. Rebel apparently sought a full screenplay credit, but was only awarded an additional writing credit by the Australian Writers Guild, with Riley receiving the sole screenplay credit. Why wouldn't she? If she wrote the play and adapted it for the movie, and maybe Rebel made a few inputs here or there and gave feedback, why would you get equal credit with the original writer of the entire play? That is so idiotic. And attorney Camille Vasquez, I believe that's how you pronounce her last name, Vasquez. She's Johnny Depp's amazing attorney who helped him defeat Amber Heard in court. She is now representing the producers that Rebel Wilson defamed in this case. She stated, "Since the beginning, this dispute has been about one thing and one thing only: Rebel Wilson's obsession with taking credit where none is deserved, at the great expense of young, talented women whom she tears down, all the while masquerading to be their champion." Because you have to remember, she is not only tearing down Charlotte MacInnes to get her way, she also tore down the original writer of the play and who adapted it for the screen, Hannah Riley. That was more undercover though, because it took place in arbitration. It wasn't like a public legal battle. Charlotte is actually Rebel's second victim here, as well as Amanda Ghost. She's tearing down all these women just like Blake did while pretending to be a champion of women. So Rebel's behavior here just reeks of not only lying about SH and publicly weaponizing it to air out private grievances, but lying about someone else being the victim of sexual harassment, essentially exploiting them to settle her personal onset vendettas, especially when, at the end of the day, she goes on to demonize the alleged victim of said SH and accuse her of engaging in a transactional relationship with Amanda Ghost where she withdrew the SH claim to advance her career. It's clear that helping a victim of SH, or even SA in human trafficking, was not at the forefront of Rebel's mind. Revenge was, whether the allegations were true or not. And it's actually worse if they are true, because we all know that many victims of SA I and SH find it difficult to speak out, and some do indeed recant due to intimidation or social pressure or legal ramifications, especially when their abuser is wealthy or influential. Just because a victim recants doesn't mean they're actually not a victim. And just because victims go along with their abusers or try to protect their abusers doesn't mean they're not being abused. Sometimes they're just so terrified they do whatever their abusers say. And so in this case, if what Rebel Wilson is claiming is true, if this poor girl was sexually harassed in a power imbalance on set, and if she is being human trafficked by a Russian oligarch billionaire, then she could be terrified out of her mind to come forward about the allegations. So it's incredibly reckless and insane to publicize them when you know you could be putting her in grave bodily danger if you truly believe a psychotic Russian billionaire is human trafficking her. So if the young actress was assaulted and then intimidated into recanting, or blackmailed or even bribed to recant as a result of a power imbalance, then Rebel publicly smearing her, someone who never publicly discussed said allegations or harassment, is a hideous, selfish, clownish thing to do. It is also another form of victimization and exploitation on Rebel's part. It could also very well be putting this girl in danger, like I said. There are other more discreet official avenues to report these allegations to the proper authorities if they were true, especially the human trafficking part, because that is an insane crime, while keeping the victim's safety at the forefront of everyone's mind. But it's clear Rebel is not interested in helping or protecting this so-called victim. She's too busy slandering her because she wouldn't join her crusade against these producers, and this very well could have gotten this girl harmed if any of the allegations were true on any level. But in reality, it's clear Rebel takes no issue with viciously attacking, cyberstalking, and bullying this poor girl because she is aware the allegations she is disseminating are the product of scorn, woven from her demented imagination, like the apparent lie that she was related to Walt Disney and had secret special access to the theme park. When opposing counsel called her a fantastical liar in the court documents, they were speaking gospel truth. But we'll get more into that later in her many apparent lies from the past. What's important to note here is that all of this controversy has reportedly spawned from a completely fabricated story of sexual misconduct by Rebel, which she wasn't even a party to, nor an eyewitness to. This is bad on every level and is clearly unraveling Rebel's life and her credibility and her stance in Hollywood, because she is currently caught up in 4 different lawsuits simultaneously, if I'm counting correctly, which will financially drain her, whether she wins or not. Remember, we're not talking about Blake and Ryan here, whose combined net worth was upward of $100 million, and they were still crying about legal fees and are still trying to get rewarded legal fees because of how much this lawsuit drained them. These lawyers are expensive. She's also crying and condemning Charlotte for daring to sue her, saying that the young actress can't afford to sue her, so her lawsuit is being funded by billionaires. How about you stop presuming to know everything about this woman's life? How do you know whether or not she has a wealthy benefactor that is a relative, someone who loves her? Why does everything have to be funded by billionaires? And she's constantly making comments about the way Charlotte lives her life, her travel, this and that, because she estimates that she doesn't have enough money to do such things. Like, you don't know her, you don't know her family tree, or maybe you do because you're stalking her with a PI. I guess all of that will come out in discovery. So it's clear to me that this dipshit set out attacking Charlotte with the false confidence that she could never fight back because she didn't for a few years, and thinking Charlotte could never afford to sue her because lawsuits are very expensive. But I must say, whoever is helping to support Charlotte's legal fund, I'm so grateful for them, because this wicked bully's harassment needs to be stopped. She's the type of person who harasses and bullies people with the knowledge that they cannot afford to fight back, that they are powerless and defenseless in some way. That is what that claim is saying. When she says Charlotte can't afford to sue me, that's telling you she was attacking her thinking that she was defenseless and powerless. More proof that Rebel is the harasser and the bully and the abuser here. She's been smearing and tormenting this girl in every way she can for years, and also posting petty things about her on the official Instagram account of the movie, which we'll get into later. And she's been blaming Charlotte for the trouble behind the film, when it's clear Rebel sabotaged the entire rollout, just like Blake did with It Ends With Us, with creative disputes from day one. And I truly hope this case breaks her. And we're talking about famous, high-powered attorneys from other landmark cases being involved, like Camille Vasquez and Brian Friedman, so none of this will be cheap. But Rebel sparked it all, desperate to publicly nurse her wounded ego and falsely victimize herself. It is insane to me what narcissism drives these maniacs to do. They're all exposing themselves and self-destructing one by one. And any way you spin it, Charlotte's allegations are hers alone to publicize and legally pursue. It's not up to Rebel, and you certainly don't get to victim blame and smear her if she decided to privately recant her complaints.